can reflect back to being a player with and manager of some of the finest players that have ever been in the game.
Hotspur America. From the United States to N17, this is the original US-based podcast dedicated solely to Tottenham Hotspur Football Club.
When you're at a club like Tottenham, they expect you to win all the time. Be the best club in the country as far as I'm concerned.
Coming to you each week during the season.
Spurs in full cry here. Lamella! Oh, what a goal! And Christian Eriksen has scored!
I hate Arsenal. I just hate them.
Oh, what a goal! And Cafu has put Tottenham in front! Kane comes to the Emirates, scores for Spurs.
We're the Yids in America.
Carried away, but Dukes is there to tap in!
To dare is to do.
Tottenham Hotspur turning on the style. Glory, glory night at White Hart Lane. The Spurs are still marching on.
This is Hotspur America.
All right, episode 8, season 4 of the Hotspur America podcast. Quite a roller coaster of emotions this week. Wonderful performance in the Champions League. Not so hot in the Prem, and a lot more coming up with League Cup action, more Champions League action, and of course the league that we have to deal with. Joining me this morning, all the way from across the pond, Vass. Coney, how are you, my friend?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Ken. Great to be back with you guys again after a week away.
Yeah, and great to have you. Timmy also joining us as he's setting his fantasy football lineups for the NFL this morning. What's up, Tim?
Not much, just recovering from yesterday.
Yeah, I know. Long day at the Community Beer Company. We'll get into them here shortly. And almost a new person on the pod this week. Simon's been absent for the last few, but it's good to have you back, pal.
Yes, hello. My name's Simon, and I'm happy to be on the podcast.
And as always, Hotspur America podcast brought to you by the Community Beer Company, the perfect pub pint to share with your mates. We were there yesterday. We will get into that discussion here shortly. But let's rewind, if we can, to midweek. Champions League 3-1 victory over Borussia Dortmund. This game started off like a ball of fire. Any surprises from a lineup standpoint for you, Simon? And were you happy with the way the team looked?
Well, I think you guys know I went into the cone of silence. I was working that day, and I don't know how I managed to stay in the cone until I watched the game. And I still had this dread, because whenever I watch a game delayed, we don't do well. But I had this horrible dread that somehow it didn't go our way. So I was kind of surprised by the opening flurry. Wasn't so surprised that they equalized so quickly. And, when we went ahead in the second half, I thought, wow, this is pretty good. So from the lineup perspective, no, I thought it was a strong lineup. Obviously, we knew we wouldn't have Dele, and we don't have him for another couple of games. So Son slotted in nicely there. Was I surprised that Aurier started in the right back position for his first game in such an important game? Probably that was the biggest surprise for me. But I thought he did well. I thought the first half, the team, I was talking to Sam at the brewery yesterday. Mm-hmm. I came away thinking, what the hell are we doing in this first half, just bringing them on? But I honestly believe that was Poch's tactic, was to absorb their pressure because they're a high-pressing team and break them. And that's what we did with the first 2 goals. And I think once the third goal went in the second half, the dynamic of the game changed a lot, and it was all Tottenham, and we could have easily got another couple of goals.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. In fact, I was waiting for more, and that seems like a lot of the MO for Tottenham lately, is even when we do score what seems to be more than a sufficient amount of goals to put a game away, we walk away going, man, we could have put in 5, 6, 7, 8, and we don't. So we talked about that a little bit on the pod, I think, a week or two ago. Is that a worry that we continually don't clinically finish the way that we probably should as a team? Tim, when you look at that Borussia Dortmund game, do you come away with any different thoughts? Did you see things differently than Chairs?
No, not really. I mean, I think Poch got his tactics spot on in this one. We've talked about it in the past when we go up against Liverpool, a high-pressing team. Mm-hmm. We can't control it because we try and, match fire with fire, and it doesn't work out. It hasn't worked out when we've played Liverpool in the past. So Dortmund comes out strong with a 4-3-3, pressing high, pushing the tempo, and we kind of just laid back, and it left them susceptible to the counterattack. And I thought it was really good to see Poch kind of counter that, and knew going into the game that he needed to counter it. And especially, on a big pitch at Wembley, you can't come right out and press. Sometimes you need to play that counter. And so I think tactically Pochettino did a great job with that. And also, I was really excited when the lineup came out to see us finally put in a strong lineup in the Champions League. You know, last year we didn't do that, and maybe it was the teams we were playing against. We thought we could get away with a weaker lineup, but it shows we're really taking it seriously. We put out probably the strongest available lineup that we had.
Yeah, and not to try to mix the two matches that happened this week. And I'm doing my best not to, but I know that a couple of us have talked until we're blue in the face about the fact that the way Pochettino's system is set up, Vass, is that you want to counterattack. You want to be able to get on the sprint and charge down the field and have a 3-on-3 or a 4-on-4 situation and let the creativity of those players on the break dictate what's going to happen to the end product. Conversely, we cannot break down a team that just sits 10 behind the ball. And unless we score early and open them up, we are never going to be able to do what we did, like we did against Hull and like we did against Leicester. We were fortunate to get an early goal in those games, and then the rest of it took care of itself. Is that an issue with the players themselves or Pochettino's system, do you think? Or when you look at those two dynamics, either the game is pressing and the teams that are at the top of the league, we are constantly going to be able to have that opportunity to counterattack, whereas mid-table and lower, we've got to break teams down, and we don't seem to be very successful at doing that.
Yeah, can't disagree with any of that. I think on Wednesday, Pochettino got his tactics spot on. As Timmy said, when we try to go toe-to-toe with high-pressing teams, we've often come unstuck. So he's played it the right way, and when we play against opponents who want to bring the game to us, we can find spaces that we can exploit. Conversely, as we saw yesterday against Swansea, that team were never going to leave their third of the pitch, no matter what we try to do, and it becomes increasingly difficult for us to break them down, and we need to find a way of doing it. I think, okay, got to be careful now because I'm sort of spilling into a Swansea game already when we're kind of talking about
it begs to ask the question,
Yeah. So I think we need to start games quickly. We need to move the ball quickly, and an early goal is going to help us in those situations. But it's a question of what happens if we don't get an early goal, and we saw the result of that yesterday. But Wednesday's performance was awesome by all accounts. I still haven't seen the game, sadly. I was sat on an aeroplane waiting to take off just about the teams were going to kick off on Wednesday evening, so I've only seen the goals. Thankfully, there were 3 passengers that got to the plane late, so we kept our phones on for as long as possible, and it was 2-1 when we took off. So we spent the rest of the 4.5-hour flight wondering what the hell happened until we landed and we found out we'd won 3-1, so fantastic. So Pochettino got it right there. Borussia Dortmund brought the game to us, and we played it perfectly, but we've got to try and sort of continue that sort of form into our league form now, I think.
Yeah. The Dortmund goals themselves, Sonny's was great. The near post, the speed really benefited him in that regard. Kane's on the 15th, a little bit of trepidation in terms of, really good chance or just like kind of a tap-in type thing, but the one he had in the second half, certainly not. Yarmolenko's goal for them was wonderful. And we kind of talk about things that happen during the course of a match that didn't go our way. It'll come around later on in the season. They had a couple of goals, and in fact one for sure disallowed from Aubameyang, where he got called offside and he was not. And then yesterday, obviously, with the handball calls, and we'll get into all that with Swansea, it seems like in the same week we had things turn around on us that maybe benefited us earlier in the week. The officiating in both these competitions, do you see a marked difference as these officials from other leagues and other countries come in to do the officiating for these Champions League matches representing English clubs?
Yeah, 'cause I think we had an Italian team doing the officiating for Wednesday's match, and you can always tell if it's a continental European officiating team. They tend to not be as lenient as I think some of the English Premier League referees are. I thought he was very quick. I'll give him some credit at the beginning here. I think he made it very clear. There's your one foul, one more and you're done. And then he followed that through. So that was certainly good officiating. But then he was very, very quick to dish out some of those cards. And I thought he got a lot of calls incorrect. There were a couple of corners that clearly went our way, and the free kick was awarded. There was, if we want to talk about the goal that Dortmund scored, that was deemed offside when clearly it wasn't. And that was glaringly onside. The build up to their goal, the Yarmolenko goal, when that play started on the left wing, it was offside too. Marginal, but it's football for you. There are going to be mistakes, and again, it just verifies that you need to have that video assistant referee, because we're going to continue to have these conversations while these mistakes are made. So, you could argue also was the second yellow on Vertonghen harsh. We've always got our lily white tinted glasses on for efforts like that. I don't think it was intentional, but it's the flailing arm, so it's going to get a yellow probably, and in that situation happened to be the second yellow, and it was probably needless at that point. He'd lost possession, and he's trying to recover, and he's off balance, and the arm goes up. So it is what it is, and he's out at least. Our next opponent, I want to say it's a walk in the park, because verified yesterday that nothing's a walk in the park for us, but it's Apple Nicosia, and we should be able to replace Vertonghen pretty easily for that game.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And Tim, when you look at the tactical differences that go into matches like this, when you're getting ready to play one of Europe's best teams versus one of the mid-table teams or lower, in fact, of your own league, and given the competition itself, right? Are these things that cause players to pause a little bit, or do you think that they look at these with equality in their own eyes as players? It doesn't matter who they're playing against; they're going to go out and put in a shift either way. Vass, I think Tim had to drop for a second to reset some equipment. What do you think about that when you look at the two different sets of teams that are coming at a player? Do you expect the same kind of effort? As fans, we do, but do you honestly expect that from the player standpoint?
Looks like you lost them all, mate.
Maybe.
It's you and me.
No, I'm back. Sorry, Ken. I had the microphone on mute there. So, what we're looking at, repeat the question for me, please, Ken?
Yeah, just the two different teams that a club will play against during the course of a week. When you have one of the best sides in Europe versus one of the mid or lower table clubs, from a player's perspective, is it harder to get up for that league game, or should the league game even take precedence as you're moving forward?
Well, look, as a professional footballer, you need to be performing regardless of the opposition. I can imagine possibly that after the highs of Thursday and a great win against the league leaders in Germany, you're now facing a struggling team in the Premier League who are off the back of a couple of poor performances, and perhaps psychologically you're thinking may not need to try as hard, because if we can beat the Dortmund team, maybe we should be beating the Swansea team. But what happens there is complacency sets in, and a bit of lethargy, perhaps, and that was evident in the performance yesterday, in my opinion. So it's a very fine line. You can't sort of lower your effort by a small percentage, regardless of the opposition. You've got to keep playing at your optimum always, because otherwise that slight drop off is going to manifest itself into something that's going to affect the team performance as a whole, I think.
Yeah, I totally get that. Tim, Davey Elder, the Spurs poet on Twitter, is asking, after yesterday, should we field the strongest side and compete in cup games this week? The backlash would be unbearable if we fielded a young team and did not win against Barnsley. And also he asks, in the same same breath, I love a big trophy, but is the top 4 the big prize this season, given the damage it could do if we don't qualify for Champions League football? And I'm assuming that's moving into a big stadium.